The Dark Room, exploring the strange and controversial, with your hosts, Paul Salvatore and Jordan Randall. Today we're talking with street preacher David Lynn.
When I was 16 years old, I was a young guy that was misguided, and I found myself involved with a lot of bad individuals and gangs, and I had, I guess, a Jesus moment where I actually sat down and read the Bible and discovered that my life was incomplete and that the path I was taking was destructive, and I acknowledged that there was a God and I needed a Savior, and that was when I was 16 years old, and I started literally almost telling people about my newfound faith, and young individuals in metro housing communities, and that began the whole start of my preaching or just evangelistic activities, and trying to, with the goal of helping the young people and the generation find purpose in life and meaning, and to live more productive and definitely encounter God for themselves.
All right. So, why do you think, though, the police have been approaching you so many times?
Well, I think what I do is very controversial, and it shouldn't be, actually. I occupy public sidewalks and make use of our Charter of Freedom and Rights to express my views and my faith, and because it's very uncommon in our culture for preachers or pastors to go on a street corner and proclaim their faith, it comes across a little maybe very bold or different or socially awkward, and so not knowing what to do, I think at times people think that preaching belongs only in a church, or sharing your point of view should only stay in a building. And I think the reason why they do that is because our culture has kind of thrown out this teaching that we have freedom of speech, but has also given us the impression that while you have freedom of speech, it still should be kept in a private setting. And so there's this socially conservative mentality that when you actually see freedom of speech in practice, people don't know what to do with it. And so the police, I guess, at times have felt it's been intrusive or disturbing at times. I don't think they know what to do with it sometimes. Yeah, so that's why I think they've been.
Yeah, I was also noticing, just looking at your other videos, that there's been just a whole host of people who have attacked you verbally. There was one guy I was looking at yesterday. It was like on Danforth, which was just it was just so hard to believe, because he was a preacher too, turned out, or he was a pastor. So, I mean, that was a pretty extreme case. But I want to ask you, like, how do you sustain doing what you do in the face of all that?
Well, I guess it's my belief that people need some kind of hope and inspiration and faith in their lives, and I'm the voice of their conscience at times, and so I feel the need to expose what's going on around us and point people to true happiness and peace, which is found in Jesus, and at least that's what I believe in. And so it's a worthwhile cause for me. I feel that I have a message that can transform people's lives, and they don't know it, or they may have heard it but misunderstood it. And so I feel that I have the gift to communicate that in a way that can enable people to receive new meaning and purpose in their lives. And so that's what kind of keeps me going despite whatever I see.
Right. So just as a quick diversion here, I mean, there's no judgment here at all.
That's fine.
So I was also looking at, because, I'm a huge fan of music, hip-hop included. You might have seen that thing at the door.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw there was a bit of a standoff on hip-hop, which I thought was pretty interesting. So, like, what, your own, was that, like an indictment of hip hop, or was it a portion of hip hop, or how do you feel about
You
hip
know what?
hop?
I wrestle back and forth in my own mind
Yeah.
because hip hop is, I guess, an offshoot of, or it's a element of my culture in some ways, and it's a poetic expression which I appreciate. I used to be a rapper as well,
Okay.
and I still can do a little something.
Nice.
You know, so I don't think the art form is wrong in itself. Actually, I just what I was more addressing, and I know that video came across like I was just demonizing all of hip hop. I was more addressing the predominant forms of hip hop that I see in the media that tends to demonize women and objectify women and promote the drug culture, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been involved in the hip hop culture that it's more it brought the downfall of so many intelligent and bright-minded individuals, youth who are affected by these negative role models that seem to be on the billboards, and it was more that I was addressing,
Okay.
the spirit behind that form of hip hop. If it was hip hop that is positive and constructive, I know some of the old hip hop lyrics seem to be more like Redhead Kingpin, do the right thing, not talking about a black or white thing. You know, those kind of lyrics, that's good and positive. And so I was just more addressing, the negativity that
Yeah.
is predominating a lot of the hip hop today. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I thought it was great. I mean, some of your references, like at one point you were, because I've been into reggae for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, I've been DJing since I was 19, and at one point, like, you're talking about girls, you start, you make the reference to Shovel Rice, says girls, girls, it was like line by line, everywhere, something, you know. So, yeah, no, it was definitely interesting. But I want to also mention, there is, I think, a church. I can't remember who it is. Like, one of the pioneers of hip hop started a church.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if that was Mace
yeah.
or Reverend, the guy in Run DMC or
Yeah, I
something
can't
like
remember,
that.
but it was with the condition that there would be no, like, hip hop profanity in any of the music.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it was interesting. Yeah, I would have to look back on that. But yeah, I want to ask you about the whole idea of public space because, as you mentioned, that for some people in their minds, like it's a place that's supposed to be neutral. Um, how would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, public space is exactly what it is, space for the public. And the public is people that are citizens of Canada, or even, or at least citizens of Canada are protected under our charter because they're Canadian citizens. And they reflect people with a multiple form of views and political expressions and beliefs. And so if it's going to be a public space, everybody should have the right to be themselves without feeling marginalized and discriminated against. And the moment you start to say it's a public space and so it should be neutral, then that means that nobody's allowed in the public space because nobody's neutral. Someone's going to have a desire to smoke, someone else won't, or someone might want to drink or talk about sex or talk about their life. Now, if that's allowed and religion's off, then what that's really saying is that public space is a secular space which forbids any form of belief in God or anything that's a spiritual expression. And that in itself is unfair because secularism, atheism, or agnosticism is a spiritual expression as well. It's a form of belief. It's a worldview, and so public space, if it's neutral, has to be diverse, and at least that's what I believe. And diversity means tolerating things that you might not like. For instance, at Young and Dundas, I see hip hop artists, rock and roll artists, the 420 political protest thing. There's a lot of things, the LGBT pride parade things. There's a lot of different things that I may not personally agree with, but I support it in the sense of their right to be themselves and to do what they want. And that's Canada. And so public space should be for everybody. And that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But should there be like a cutoff? I mean, because there could. I mean, with most things, for the most part, I think that happen there, they tend to try to have a positive overall message.
Yeah.
But I mean, like if like a group of Nazis or something started to set up shop like there at Young and Dundas. I mean, I don't think a lot of people would be necessarily cool with that, right?
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, when you define positive, everybody, I mean, the Muslim would think Sharia law is positive. They say Islam really means peace, and they emphasize that in the media when it really means submission, although it has the same root word. Christians believe that Jesus Christ is the medium of peace or positivity. He's the way, the truth, and the life. Everybody has their version of what right and wrong is, and that's called a country of diversity. So in the States, I find it interesting how they handle equality and freedom of speech. They do have Nazi groups that are protected to have their little rallies. But the good thing about that is that, I think when you start putting restrictions on people, you're insulting their intelligence. I mean, if you had a bunch of Nazis standing up there, I mean, people would look at that and say, hey man, these guys are crazy, and they wouldn't support them, and you might even have a counter rally and they may not want to come back again. I mean, so that's what we have. That's what Canada's all about, is freedom of expression, diversity. We have votes, we have a democratic system. So I wouldn't really stifle anybody, from even a Nazi guy, or Black Panther people. I mean, we have them down the road, actually. We have what do they call it? The Hebrew Israelites, who are pro-black guys that think every white man is going to be their slave one day. I definitely don't agree with them. And I'm one of these days going to openly challenge them publicly on video. But you know what? They have their right. And I think when it starts to get violent, or people start, that's when I think that there's a line should be drawn, right?
Yeah, that makes sense, absolutely.
So, David, sometimes you're out in public at Dunn Square, what have you, where you're not sure who's going to pass by. But then there's situations I notice that you put yourself in where the environment you're going to get in, like at the Pride Parade.
Sure.
And so you're expecting, I'm sure you're expecting tension, disagreement on a large scale. So I guess the question is twofold. Is how do you even prepare for something like that? And then how do you manage the situation?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, I go with the goal of seeing. I mean, when I preach on the public sidewalks, I'm a pastor and evangelist, so I want to see people come to a faith in Jesus Christ, or find hope in Christ. And so whatever event I go to, I preach the same message. I go to the Caravana, every year. I go to the Taste of the Danforth. I go to the Pride Parade. I stand at Yonge and Dundas, and it's general same message I preach: repentance, faith, that God loves the world, and that you can find hope in Him. And so, yeah, every community is going to receive that differently. The LGBT community might feel that I'm coming with a message of hate towards them, or discrimination. They may feel that the Christian message is opposed to them as individuals. The Caravana community will receive it like, you're stifling my fun. I'm here to have a party, and you're making it seem like what I'm doing is wrong. And Taste of the Danforth community, I haven't really had so much challenges. They're just coming to eat. So, I mean, it's different there. But, yeah, I mean, it's sensitive. I mean, I try my best to communicate that God sent His Son to die for everybody, and that there's hope. And and I know sometimes I have to address things that people ask me, like, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? Or is the Bible against fun, or is it against drinking? And so I do have to address that from my worldview. But I try to address everything in a relevant and way that enables people to see the primary message that I'm trying to communicate, is that Jesus died for you, and that there's hope for you, and God loves you. And that's what I try to do.
Right. So are you starting, before you even go out to the actual street and start preaching, are you starting from the premise that there's a lot of people out there who are searching for answers, or want to learn. Because what I find interesting about your videos is that even the people who disagree with you, you create a crowd. Like you draw them. You're striking a chord with them. I mean, there's different ways of looking at that, but I want to know, like, you being there right on the front lines, like, what do you think it is that's even grabbing the people who disagree with you? And they stay there for, they're taking time, they're sitting there for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So you're striking some chord with them, even though some of them aren't agreeing with you at all, but it's like they're reckoning still with you at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. I think what I'm addressing are questions and concerns they have within their own heart and mind. And I'm probably one of the few voices that's open enough to talk about it, but in a way that doesn't seem so crass or so illogical. And so when I address things like hip hop or relationships or sexual stuff or whatever I address, I'm drawing out certain questions that people are afraid to ask but are thinking about, and I allow them to think with me. So I engage them in that dialogue instead of just coming at them. The Bible says this is wrong, and that's it. Like, that's just more of a ignorant approach. I would say something, and I would allow them to communicate, and I wouldn't say call it a debate, but reason with people on their views, and allow truth to surface from either their end or my end. And I think people like that dialogue. People feel heard. People feel that, wow, there's actually a religious person, because Canada is primarily religious, even though it's a secular form of religious. But most people, about 70%, say they embrace Christianity. There's a large growing amount of Muslims within Canada who have a Islamic point of view, but it's within the context of Canadian values. So I find that most people are kind of struggling on the inside of how to relate religion and secularism together, and can it mix, and how do I live my life? And so I think by bringing that out and engaging people in that dialogue, I'm only doing what they're already doing on the inside, and that's why I think it strikes a nerve, and it gets people staying there, sometimes even for an hour to 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
interesting. And what I find especially interesting about what you do today is the kind of platform you've chosen because of the digital era. I find that actually interesting about street preachers in general, but especially persons like yourself who are out there all the time. Why have you chosen the street, the public space, as a way of conveying your message? Like, is there anything particular to that context that you feel is more effective than online, social media, what have you?
I learn as I go, and it's really interesting. I think with the digital age now, I mean, you don't have to have some kind of contract on some major television station. People are now creating their own music or going on YouTube, and it's more of an urban approach to communication. And I think that people value the authenticity of someone going on a street. It's more bare bones. It's more relevant to our day and age. And I think in a public square like Yonge and Dundas, where everybody gathers, it kind of creates this feel that, this feel of, I guess, I don't know, expression. I don't know what kind of word I'm trying to say, but this sense that we're free, and that we can be ourselves. And I think being in a public square where everybody gathers it allows them to truly have a sense of camaraderie, or even a sense of choice. And because now whatever is being spoken on the street, they know it's not being censored. They know it's authentic, and it's one of the few mediums that I think are still untouched. A lot of people I hear from question the media today. They question church leaders today. They question even going to religious institutions. But on the street, that's as bare as it gets. I mean, that's as authentic and truthful as it gets. And so if someone's standing on a street corner and preaching a message, and it comes out in a sound way, an educated way, I think people respect that more than even in media sources. In one way,
Right. Yeah, it's really it's much more immediate, and you can see the results.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely seems like there's always a disconnect when you're like looking at stuff online or whatever. You know, it's like the fact that there's not an actual person in front of you. So I think face to face is always sort of like the best way to communicate ideas and stuff like that. But it seems to be a bit of a dying art in this day and age. But yeah, I'd be interested to. So you said that you sort of made this switch over to religion because you experienced some hardships in your life.
Yeah, sure.
So, would you care to explain a bit more about what that was like?
Well, the transition. I mean, you know, it was basically live or die. I mean, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowd and being involved with young people with no father figures and groups of people that you didn't really feel secure or, you know, privileged enough to make it in the regular world. You know, you're just setting yourself up for a lot of trouble and devastation, and I felt some of that by what I participated in, and discovering that I had a second chance. That I could start my life again, that I could be forgiven, that I could find hope, and I could reestablish myself, and that there is a bridge to the regular world, but also in the world beyond. It was a no-brainer for me. It cost me letting go a lot of things that my friends and my peers thought were fun and pleasurable, you know, like drug use, alcohol use, you know, casual sex, and all the things that seem to be, you know, the popular thing that we see in popular culture, and it meant that was a rough shift, and but seeing why those things were destructive to our community, and seeing why it was necessary to let those things go, you know, I made a choice, and initially it was hard, but then I saw the fruit of living a positive life, and I'm a lot more peaceful and happier now, and secure and full of purpose now than I was before. And I don't feel the guilt of hurting a lady or using somebody for something, or, you know, or doing something where I'm going to have to look out over my shoulder. Now I can look people straight in the eyes. I don't have to worry if police are after me. So, you know, it's so the transition. I mean, it was just a more of a positive outtake in life, and it was just, you know, necessary for me to take. You know.
For sure.
Yeah.
So before that, did you grow up in a religious household at all, or?
My father wasn't religious, and my mother was, and so yes, when I was young, I went to church. My father never went to church. And I kind of didn't really like the whole church scene because it wasn't so fun. It was very restrictive, or at least I felt that way when I was young, because I didn't understand the moral ethics of it. And so I rebelled and went, you know, with my friends and doing all sorts of stuff. But then when I started to taste some of the fruit of that lifestyle, it made me look back to some of the roots of what my mother was teaching and what the Bible said and why it said that. It made me really question and think about what life's really about. And so I ended up, not through my mother or anybody from that church, but on my own, I read a Bible, and you know, I saw it for the first time of why this was applicable to my life, and so I made the choice to give those things up and I guess, embrace Christianity truly from my heart. Yeah.
So the people that you associated with in your youth that subscribe to like these sort of not so great things like drugs and alcohol, and so those people, they're like not a part of your life anymore, or
You know, most of them, few of my friends are shot dead, stabbed to death. I saw some of that on the news, and many of them went to jail for a very long time. I just found out about 2 years ago one of my good friends is locked up for murder. Some of the other people I heard about have like 4 to 5 children with different ladies and struggling to survive. I met one of my other good friends I haven't seen in 17 years. He just came out of jail. So, yeah, there's probably very few and a few people that I know about that made it out of Metro housing alive or doing half well for themselves. Some of them I know got into prostitution, drug abuse. So I don't really see Facebook, I'm trying to reconnect with some of them, but when I look at their lives and the choices I make, I'm not trying to say I'm any better, but my faith spared me from a lot of what they've gone through. And those who did see a positive look or experience, they also embraced faith as well, and they're doing a lot better than those who didn't. Right. So that's just my experience. I'm not saying that everybody in this entire globe doesn't do well unless they embrace faith, but I guess where I was living and the role models that were in that environment, those who did embrace faith fared better in this world than the others.
right.
And with respect to that, I want to ask you now, there's so many, whether it's music, whether it's through dance, you also have mentorships that are arguably alternative paths to religion that could free someone from these sorts of circumstances we're talking about. But I want to ask you, in your view, do you believe that they stand to fail if they don't find God? Even if they go through these how do you feel about that?
Well, it's defining success and defining, what gives people an ultimate sense of stability. Like, you can make it in this world to a degree without God. You can get a job without God. You can go to school without believing in God. As a Christian, I believe that ultimately everything you're doing is still with God, but like awareness or acknowledgement of His presence in your life, you could do it without acknowledging it. But there comes a point when you start to embrace or chase these things: education, jobs, money, houses, cars, and family, and wife, husband, that there becomes a sense of dissatisfaction over time, and you realize that there's something more than just a relationship or money or cars. And that's why we have so many famous stars that are dissatisfied doing drugs and trying to find something more. And so you may be able to get to a certain point in this world without God, but you'll also find eventually that you're empty without God. And so that's the connection between, life and purpose, life and meaning. And I do believe that ultimate true meaning and purpose is only found in God and embracing His Son, Jesus Christ. And because that brings a connection with that higher power, that ideal that everybody seems to be chasing. You're chasing love. Okay, well, where is it found? You're chasing justice or happiness. Where is that found? Is it fully tangible and present here, or is it in a person, or is it in something beyond here? And I think what really makes sense to me, at least the most, is that, this infinite or eternal sense of justice or love or peace is only in an eternal being, which I call God, and is tangibly received through Jesus Christ. So that's why I think, you can make it to a point, but you can't have a solid foundation without God.
about foundations, I have to ask because I'm always really interested in knowing how a person such as yourself, who have a very firm faith, engage, whether you're preaching or not, with people who are either agnostic or atheist, because your foundations are so different. Like, you have the Bible, they have empirical evidence. Sometimes there's overlap, they argue, but I'm really thinking here, like, the extremes. Like, someone who is just scientifically minded, how are you able to see eye to eye?
Well, everybody's different that's scientifically minded. You got theists who are scientifically minded, and you got people that aren't. I mean, so that's really a tough question to put in a ball, because everybody sees little things different. But for those that don't embrace faith and are scientifically minded, or those who are on the edge, well, I mean, I would draw them, I guess, to faith by just going to the roots of their empirical data. I mean, I would question, how can you give substance to meaning, or even empirical data itself that relies upon a premise of faith that things can be verified and tested. So I point them to that, and it always usually boils down to a lack of understanding or knowledge on their end, especially when we go back to things like the origins of creation, where a lack of empirical knowledge, or at least leads them to a place of I don't know, which to me breaks logic, because the understanding or the empirical evidence that they use to get to a premise of there is no God is not used when it gets to a place of the origins of the universe. And so there seems to be a break in logic, and that's where I find is the easiest part for me to show that there must be a higher power, or an intelligent designer, or somebody with some kind of moral or ethics, or some kind of code that is rational.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I guess I asked that question in part because I'm wondering whether you feel, and it sounds like you do, are able to engage with someone who's on the opposite side of the spectrum. Because I was wondering whether, like, you or maybe other preachers have kind of just accepted that we're going to just talk past each other. There's no point. Yeah. I've kind of given up, or both sides have given up, and this is just the way it is. But if I understand you correctly, you still feel the need to engage with that.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I'm not, the way I think, I'm not afraid of truth. Like, I'm not afraid of reason. Like, I mean, that's probably why, well, what I do is generally successful, because if something makes sense, like, I'll embrace it, even if it's coming from an atheist or agnostic. I'll think about it. I'll chew it. It has to make sense to me, and if it doesn't make sense to me, I'll discard it. And so I love reasoning with people that think outside the box and might see things differently than me, because it makes me think, it makes me grow as a person, it makes me question what I believe. And I think that's a healthy part of growing, is always returning back to what you thought was true, and questioning it, and challenging it beside counter arguments, and see if it still works or it doesn't. And maybe I got to take some of that and put it together, and maybe it makes more sense together. So it's like one big mathematical equation, just trying to make sense of life and connect it with every facet. And so that's why I want to be in the dialogue. I respect those who may not believe in God. I may not agree with them, but I love their passion to reason. And I think if more street preachers did that, and didn't just shut people down, I think we would have more believers, maybe.
Yeah. Interesting. But it's also, I'm so curious to know, because you're right there on the street, and it's happening so fast. See, I'm not sure like what happens after the fact, like after people have stopped talking to you. Like, how do you measure? Again, I mean, you mentioned there how you define it is a big thing. How do you measure your success? Like, how do you know, for example, that person's going to go home and now find faith?
Well, we're the third largest street preaching ministry in the world,
Okay.
and for a small city like Toronto to surpass those who have been in the industry for almost 20 years, almost within the span of 2 years, that is one sign of success. But also seeing that people sit down and like literally out of their day for, sometimes I've seen people that for 2 hours straight, like just captivated by this discussion, and not just one person, but many people. And after reasoning and talking on the microphone, seeing flocks of people come to my booth and take my cards, and people sending me emails, and atheists, Jewish, Muslim people converting to Jesus Christ, like literally, and sending me emails of that. I think that's a sign that whatever I'm saying or whatever I'm reasoning with them is engaging them, and it's causing them to think. And that's the main thing. I can't change anybody, and that's why when I see city officials try to stop people from preaching, or what they use that word proselytizing, which is really it's really a politically correct word to just silence some opinions and allow other opinions. But when I see it, it's really insulting to people, because it doesn't allow people to think. Like what's happening. I don't know if you know the story at Yonge and Dundas, and there was recently the management of the Yonge and Dundas Square recently restricted or didn't give a permit to a Christian group for the next year because they sang about Jesus in their songs. I don't know if you heard about that, but this is a recent phenomenon. It's been National Post picked it up, Toronto Sun, Toronto Star, Metro Media. In fact, I was on the first page of Metro Media just like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And it's insulting, because it doesn't. I mean, if Christianity is a fairy tale, and these people are talking about their sky daddy and their imaginary jail, why does it grieve people so much? I mean, they just had the Santa Claus parade, a parade of Santa Claus. I mean, he's a fairy tale. We don't see people banning people that talk about Santa Claus from public, and even though he's naughty or nice, Santa Claus is coming to town. I mean, he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you're bad or good. So we could forget to say. I mean, we don't tell kids. We don't. I don't go around bashing people who want to believe in the tooth fairy because it's a fairy tale to me. So if people want to stand on street corners and talk about fairy tales, let them be. I mean, maybe I might consider them a bit loony, but there's something in the conscience that is saying that the reason why some people are so avid against God and banning God from the public sphere is because they know that there's some truth to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be upset. It's like, you ever see a guy that's so angry at somebody because they said something? It's usually because they know something about it is true. Because when people say stupid things about me, I just dismiss them. So it's insulting when we try to ban religion from the public square, because it doesn't allow people the right to think. And if people are so afraid that the world's going to become Christian, then what you're doing is you're acknowledging that there's power in that message. And if there's so much power in the message that you have to put rules up to stop it, guess what? It's never going to be stopped. Because there's something so true about that message that it will influence people eventually.
I was thinking when you were talking before about secularism and things like that, because Jordan and I, we interview people from many different walks of life, and one thing I found is a recurrent theme in a lot of what they say about themselves is the idea of empowerment, right? That what's morally correct, or all that matters really, is whether this is a choice that I made for myself, and I can live with it, and that I'm not harming anyone in the process. Do you feel that is sufficient to be a good person?
Um, well, just basically living anyway and saying to yourself,
Yeah, like I guess so long as they obey the harm principle, where they're not actually psychologically or physically, what have you, harming anyone, that um, they're living a life that's good, whole, and complete.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think philosophically, and I know you're very
Yeah, forgive me.
educated in
No,
that
no,
in
no.
that area, but
Yeah.
um, every action or belief has every belief that manifests in an action will have a reaction. At least that's what I believe. So, our motives will manifest themselves some way. Jesus said it best: "Whatever is hidden will one day be shouted on the mountaintop." And so, if my motive, say, is to be greedy, but on the surface it doesn't look like I'm being greedy. I'm working a job and I'm working long hours. To the average person, it might look, oh, this guy's a hard-working individual. He's not harming anybody. But the motive of greed, which is propelling me to do things that way, will affect other aspects in my life. Perhaps that desire that's causing me to spend so much time at work, which makes me look like a great person on the outside, is also taking away time from my wife and kids at home, which they end up growing up feeling neglected and end up doing things that end up getting them involved in activity that's not positive. And I can cover that up and make it look like a positive thing. Oh, he's just a young boy, or, and they can cover it up very skillfully. But imagine that mindset of neglect gets passed on to the next generation, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and eventually it turns into some form of mass murderer in the next 4 generations. And so what I'm trying to say is this, is that what we might define as good on the surface isn't necessarily good. I believe everybody's thought process and philosophy and worldview does affect and shape our globe. And whether we see it in this generation or not is not the point. It manifests. And so I personally don't think that having a worldview or a faith perspective or a philosophical perspective outside of the highest ideal or the highest truth that I know to exist, which is Jesus Christ, and embracing that will truly lead to a good community, or a healthy community. I personally believe that the highest good, and embracing that truth and constantly yielding to that, which is through Jesus Christ, will turn into good things around us. But if someone just arbitrarily says, well, no, it doesn't, my lifestyle doesn't affect anybody else, I think it does eventually. I personally think it does. And I can give countless examples of people that said, what I do in my bedroom has nothing to do with you. Well, if you go and sleep with prostitutes and you do certain things, and perhaps, not saying all the time, you get some sexual disease, you pass that to your wife ends up doing things with someone else. I go, it's me and my business, I'm not harming anybody. And all of a sudden you have this little child that's born with AIDS. I mean, and then you have taxpayers that are funding, and it creates a whole world of problems. So yes, what you do privately does affect what happens publicly. At least that's what I believe.
And because as you said, my background as well is philosophy. So I've naturally been thinking about this for a long time. I'd love to get your perspective on this, because there's a lot of pain in the world. We all see it, and a lot of suffering. I see it in your videos. People pass by, I think, are flirting with, should I listen or not? When was God there? When so and so, right? So what is your take on the idea that there is this, right? There is all this suffering and pain. How do you reconcile that with the idea that God is all loving and all powerful? Like, how does it stand to reason that he would create a universe in which this was even a possibility, that people would be in this state? Because, someone who is all loving, it's very counterintuitive to think that they would just, take this laissez-faire approach and kind of be like, do what you want and I'll help you out sometimes. It's more like
Yeah.
I'll make sure to be there. So I would love to just, from
Sure.
your own perspective, what do you think?
I think it's love. I think, as contradictory as that might sound, I think love, the only way love can really exist is if you have that willingness and voluntary aspect to it. And so creating individuals in your image, or free thinking individuals that need to have the ability to love, need to also experiment and to try things that may not be so loving, just to come to terms with what love really is. And so, yeah, I think creation in itself leaves open the possibility of good and evil the moment you bring something into the world. A good example is parents that bring children into the world. I mean, why would they do that? I mean, it's like this world is already struggling and it has so much complicated thoughts that a young child will not, it'll take so long for them to even comprehend. But why do we continue to do it? And that's the big question. I think it's because we fell in love with our partner, and there's something beautiful about life, and seeing it grow and seeing its innocence and seeing it rationalize and make sense of it and still come back and say, Mom, Dad, I love you. It's a bit of a mystery. Why would we want to see a child cry, bring them to the world knowing that the first voice they're going to do is cry? Or take the risk that they might fall down and scrape their knee. It's just the beauty of someone evolving and coming to terms with things for themselves. And I guess that's what love really is. Love is letting people be free. Love is letting people choose. Love is letting people grow. And if anybody who's ever been in a relationship with anybody, I mean, you can either stifle them and control them and say, do it this way to make me happy. You could do that. But the person will never be happy in that kind of, or you can just say, you know what, I'll let you go be yourself. And you're going to see, my stability eventually. You're going to see that I love you unconditionally. And that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer, because it gives me pause to think just how much love is suffering. I mean, I have a lyric for you now too, actually.
Yeah.
There's just, I always think about this one when I talk about these sorts of things about love is Junior Kelly. There was that hit song in the early 2000s. If love's so nice, why it hurts so bad?
Yeah.
That's the chorus. But I always think about that, like in every context, whether talking about friendships, relationships, whether you believe or not, with anything you love, there's always that kind of intermingling of pain and pleasure, and maybe that is I don't know if the right way to say it is like the price you have to pay, but I guess I'm still trying to figure out, there is that mystery about it, like why they always have to go hand in hand. Why it can't just be pure bliss.
Yeah. I guess it's that dynamic of difference between created and creation, or the moment you have something different from yourself, you're going to have challenges, because I think in some ways all of us are narcissistic. We love ourselves so much, and we wish everybody was like us, understood us, talk like us, think like us, but in a weird sense we like people that are different from us at the same time. It's a mystery of human beings. It's a mystery of life. But the moment you have something different, you're constantly trying to merge the two together, and that is painful. Taking two different things and putting male and female together, they're different, they think different, but yet we're attracted. It's like positives and negatives. It's attracted.
It's like if it were too easy,
it
wouldn't be worth it,
But there's something about it.
Yeah.
There's something about it, making sense of difference, making sense of different thoughts, and
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great answer. There's that mystery. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, probably my final question to you would be for people that don't embrace or accept Jesus, what does this mean for them in terms of afterlife?
Well, of course, the standard Islamic belief is that you would go to hell. The standard Hindu belief or Buddhist belief would be, well, if you don't embrace the truth teachings from their gurus or their Buddha, you would reincarnate and maybe be in either a worse life form. I mean, every religion is a bit it marginalizes some because a belief is a belief. You believe something about something, and so even Christianity has its belief. I mean, those who don't accept forgiveness obviously won't be forgiven. And Christ is the forgiveness. And so we place it on this figure named Jesus. And I mean, common sense. I mean, no matter which way you want to look at it, if you stood before a court of law and you don't accept the plea bargain and you've been convicted of murder and they're trying to say, okay, we'll give you manslaughter. If you don't accept the manslaughter plea bargain, you're going to be convicted of murder. So it's not a bad thing for someone to have a belief about where someone would go if they don't accept their religion or their belief. It's just everybody has something like that. So yeah, Christianity says, you know what? Jesus is the forgiveness. That's God's love extended towards us. And if you don't accept God's love, then you're saying that you're fine without him and you don't need it. And so when you stand before the judgment day and you say, I don't need God, I don't need your mercy, and you find out that you need mercy but you still reject it, then you won't have mercy. And our belief is that sin deserves punishment. Just like our judicial system, you break the law, you do the time. We believe the same thing. You break the law of God, you do the time. The only good thing about Christianity is that there's a plea bargain, a good plea bargain. You can be forgiven. And so yeah, if someone doesn't want it, then they, by their own willful choice, choose to be condemned. And because on that day it's going to be a final separation between good and evil, that person has condemned themselves to a place of evil, which is unfortunate. And that's why we send people out to preach the gospel, tell them, listen, God loves you. Like, don't condemn yourself. You can be forgiven. Don't give up on yourself. And people take it wrong all the time, maybe because of bad communication. I mean, Christians see themselves as freedom fighters or people with a cure, an answer. It's like a doctor going to a foreign mission to help the poor Africans from their disease, and they're trying to give them medication. I mean, if you don't want to take the medication, why? I mean, we want to help you, So Christian missionaries and evangelists are simply people that strongly believe that they can bridge the gap between sinful humanity and God. And all you need to do is accept Jesus Christ, and you can have that relationship restored. If you don't want it, that's totally fine. It just sucks for you, and it breaks, for we believe, it breaks God's heart that you wouldn't want to reconnect. And so yeah, I mean, people, and the sad part about it is I find that even if a person doesn't accept Jesus Christ, most people embrace a destructive lifestyle unknowingly. Like, I see chain smokers. Like, why would you? And no offense to chain smokers at all. I mean, it's an addiction. Most smokers I know want to quit, which is weird, but they do it. It's probably hard, but it's just they embrace a kind of lifestyle that's destructive to their own health, and this seems to be a part of our DNA, that we are attracted to junk food. We're attracted to things that destroy us, but yet we know deep down inside it's not good. And so yeah, when people deny Jesus Christ, what they're really doing in a Christian mindset is denying God's forgiveness, and that is separation from God. And Christians call that hell. And hell, from what the Bible describes hell as, is a place of torment and suffering. And when I look at is hell going to be a place of fire all the time? Well, he uses that illustration, but I don't think it's going to be full of fire. I think it's going to be people left to their own negativity. And when we see people left to their own illusions and negativity here, it's a depraved, tormenting lifestyle with no peace and happiness. And that's what hell is like. It's leaving people to their own depravity, and that is torture. That's the worst torture. And being in a state like that without any hope of redemption, it's a place that should be grievous and scary for all. I wouldn't want anyone to go there. Nobody from no community, no sexuality. I wouldn't want anybody to go there. And so that's what Christians believe, right?
So, David, yeah, just my last question, just to bring it back to street preaching. I have to say the videos, they're very intense.
Yeah.
Like, I had to stop and then start, because it's just full on. And they're long, right? I think the one I was looking at was like 15 minutes. So, I mean, personally, if I were in a situation like that, I know personally, I would have like moments of doubt, not necessarily about my faith, but like, is this the right way to reach people? Like, I'm being verbally assaulted, I have to deal with the police. I mean, all these things, are wrong, right? But that's what's actually happening. Like, I don't feel I can go on this way, in this mode, right? Maybe I'll do it online, whatever. So I'm wondering how things are for you now. Is it still that full on? And whether you're able to foresee yourself with this continuing, being able to still go out there every day, maintaining that personal strength that is required to do that.
Yeah, I think I've been at Young and Dundas for about 6 years doing the same thing down there, and been doing this for many, many years prior. I meet random people on the subway saying, "Hey, I watch your videos," from every walk of life, and even you ended up seeing the videos. So what I realize is that, either I'm going to win them or I'm going to lose them, right? And I'm definitely going to be influencing some people. And when you get confrontation, what I've come to realize is confrontation is not always a bad thing. Confrontation is a necessary thing for growth in every person. And when you're challenged on your belief, you're either going to win or you're going to lose. And if people are so hostile towards something, you have to ask yourself, what's the reason why? And it also exposes what's in someone's heart. When I see some of the reactions of people on the streets that are irrational or unreasonable, it kind of indirectly shows them who's right, because you don't see me reacting like that to your views.
Right.
So it shows a character difference.
Yeah.
It shows that my character is greater than yours. Now, I'm not saying I'm better as a person. I make mistakes too. But when you put philosophical beliefs up against each other, and you see how one reacts or what one says versus what the other, and you have that confrontation, and one has to rise up above the other. One it's very clearly visible that one rises up above the other. Then that makes people think, what was I embracing all this time? Because if I saw atheism destroyed, if I saw Islam destroyed, if I saw right in front of my face, without a weapon, but philosophically, and this guy's preaching Christ, and he stands above, maybe what he's saying is true, I'm going to go take his card. And that's what I've been seeing happening. And so I say bring it on. I bring on the challenge, bring on the waves and the winds, because if what I have is true, it will stand. If what I have is false, it will fall. And I will embrace what is true. See, I just want for me as a person, I want what's true. I want to live my life knowing that I'm doing the right thing. If there is something called right, I want to be on that path. If it's wrong, why would I want to even stand for what's wrong. I'm only going to destroy myself. So I guess where I'm at, this is where what I believe. It's stood up, and it's overcoming everything. It's exactly what it says in the Bible. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And if that really is true, then so far it is true. It's been true for me for about 20 years. I've seen it take my grades from 50s to 90s. I've seen it get me into a place of receiving a master's degree. I've seen it overcome other philosophical approaches. I've seen it influence the nation. Lenny Kravitz even watches my videos, and he called me, met with him when he came to Toronto. All he wanted to do was see me.
That's great.
So if what I'm saying on the streets is influencing even Hollywood, then I think I'm on to something. And I'm not saying I'm anybody special. It's just I've only seen my belief true so far, and if something's more truer, I'd embrace it in a second.
Okay.
Funny story about David Lynn is when you first contacted me, Paul, about doing this interview with him,
Right.
I thought you said David Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
And I think my heart almost exploded.
Right.
And then I realized that I just misread the
Well, you would
text.
definitely be appropriate for the dark room. This is
It
a
would be,
space.
yeah. If you're listening, David Lynch, you know where to
Love to
contact
have you
us,
as a guest.
darkroom.ca. Yeah. Send us some comments in the feedback section. But David Lynn is a very interesting fellow himself.
Absolutely.
You know?
A real person of integrity. I really enjoyed talking to him about his ideas of freedom of speech and how he's just able to compose himself in the face of so much opposition.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of very positive things that I can't say that I necessarily stand for everything he's saying about everyone going to hell, but I do believe quite firmly that most of what his motivation is in life is to spread positivity. And religion, say what you will about it, but so long as you're being a positive person and treating everyone around you with the respect that they're due, then I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's emblematic, really, of a democratic society. And that gives me hope. What he represents to me is someone who can speak in public very controversially, upset people, and at the end of the day, no one gets physically hurt. People can disagree, and really vehemently so at the end of the day, but nobody gets hurt. People can walk away. Maybe in that process, people's ideas can change about each other. And that's why I really was happy that he accepted the invitation to the show. I wanted to talk to him on that level, because clearly I know that not all our listeners are religious, or Christian for that matter, what have you. But to talk to him as someone who's out there, just as an individual, who's able to just speak so openly about what he believes, I think is quite courageous and could, in a way, be an example to us all about standing for what we believe in, whether we're religious or not.
Absolutely. It's about finding a truth that you believe in and basically enlightening yourself through that. And I think that he's found what he needs to do that, and that's great for him. And I think that everyone can find that in many different things. So, do Paul and I deserve to burn in a fiery hell for all of eternity? That is the big question of the week. Send your responses, requests into our comment section on either Facebook or Podbean, and also be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes.
You're not going to want to miss next week's cast. We're talking with Stephanie Walsh,
who is a 52-year-old transgender woman who has recently reimagined herself as a 6-year-old girl. So that'll be interesting. Until then.
This is The Dark Room.